Welcome to Fundamentals of Production Advanced Lab Box Pleats video. So this is the second of 3 types of pleats that we are learning. And this type of pleat is actually made up of knife pleats. So if you haven't done the knife pleats, go do those first because that's gonna really help you in this sample. So the supplies you'll need is you're gonna need a marking tool of some kind. Again, I am using a marker purely for the sake of you guys being able to see the line clearly on camera. I recommend you use a pencil. I also recommend that you do not use a Frixion pen. Frixion pens remove with heat, and since we are taking all of these lines and we're pressing them in specific locations, we don't want those lines to disappear on us for the purposes of this sample. So don't use Frixion pens, do use a pencil. You will need straight pins, your straight ruler, your handout, and then of course also your fabric. So again, we are approaching the technique of doing these pleats as if a draper has handed you a pattern and has said, go pleat. So here is our pattern. On our handout, there's the pattern. You can either draw that directly onto your fabric rectangle, or you can do a paper pattern here. So here I have a paper copy of the pattern. Now, this is one thing to note with box pleats in particular, is the direction that they are folded on one side, they're going to look the opposite way on the other side. And I'm going to show you that in a minute. So it's really important if you're ever handed a pattern to double check with your draper which direction these arrows mean. Does this mean that these arrows go like this from the wrong side, or do they go like this from the right side? So double check. For the purposes of this assignment, it's the same side. The arrows are pointing exactly where I want you to go put them, okay? So let's take a look at these pleats. So the first type is a regular box pleat, but there's also an inverted box pleat, which we'll see in a second. So your sample is going to have both types of box pleats. And it's really important that you guys mark these lines clearly because I want to see which side is your right side and which side is your wrong side, because these pleats are inverted depending on which direction they're folded. So let's take a look at that. So in the pattern, we've got these 2 lines with arrows pointing towards the center line. So if I fold these together, that is a box pleat because it creates a little box right there. Okay? And it opens up. So these are 2 knife pleats that are pointed together. That's exactly what they are. And this is a regular knife pleat. Now, take a look at this pleat. I'm going to flip this over. Does the pleat look the same on this side? The answer is no. This, on this side, is an inverted box pleat. But on this side, it is a regular box pleat. So this is why it's important to know which direction do your arrows mean. Are these arrows for the right side of the fabric or the wrong side of the fabric? Okay, so from this side, this is a regular box pleat, and this is an inverted box pleat. So we've got 2 lines right here with arrows pointing away from each other. So I've got a knife pleat that's tucking in that way and a knife pleat that's tucking in this way. And there's the difference. So this section right here is a box pleat, and this section right here is a box pleat. This one's the traditional, and this one is the inverted. Now, if we flip this over, they're the same when we flip it over, because this was the regular on the other side, and this was the inverted on the other side, and now they're flipped. Okay, so enough visuals with the paper. Let's actually do it in fabric. Okay, so I'm going to grab my handout here, put it where I can see it, and we are going to mark our fabric. Unlike the last video, I did triple check my measurements, and it does come out right. I was using a Frixion pen, and it came out right. I used a Frixion pen to make sure I was right. Okay, so we've got 1/2 inch on this side. Where did my marking tool go? Here it is. So the first little section is 1/2 inch wide. So there we go. It's my 1/2 inch line. Then the next one is 1 inch. So 1 inch over. Right there. And be careful, make sure you're taking your time, that these rows are nice and neat and straight. Okay, so we've got 1/2 inch, 1 inch. Now we got 2 sections of 1 inch. 2 inches, sorry, 1/2 inch, 1, 2, 2. So again, our rulers are 2 inches wide, so I'm just going to line up the edge there. So there's one section. And here is the second 2. So 1/2 inch, 1, 2, 2. Now I'm on to this 1 inch block. 1 inch. And now I have 3 sections of 2 inch wide. Okay. Make sure these are nice and straight. All right, so there's one section. 2 sections. 3 sections. And that should leave this one as 1/2 inch. So let me flip my ruler over and check it. Yep, that is 1/2 inch wide. Great. Now what I did last time that I didn't do this time is I didn't mark my seam allowance line. I am doing this on purpose, just so you can see you can either mark your lines up and down first and then do your seam allowance, or like in the knife pleats, you can do the seam allowance and then the lines. It really doesn't matter. It only matters if you put your seam allowance in. You have to do that before you put in the arrows, because you want the arrows in the seam allowance. Ooh. So again, I am using a 5/8 seam allowance, just drawing a line right there across the top. So let's take a look at which direction these arrows go. So on the knife pleats, it was really easy. All the arrows just went the same direction. These ones do not, so look very, very carefully. So I'm actually gonna kind of line this up. So here are the 2 inch boxes right here. And these arrows are taking this line towards this middle. So an arrow going that direction. And just like that. Okay, so there's my 1 inch. And then here are my 3 2 inch sections. So there's no markings on this middle. And the ones on the outside, the arrows are pointing out. Cute cat. Okay, so now we have all of our lines. And we are ready to take this to the iron and press it. And then we'll stitch it. So let's head over to the iron. So now here we are at the iron, and it is time to press these pleats. So I'm going to start with the regular box pleats. We're going to take both of these lines and fold them to this one. And I'm going to do this all as one step. So very carefully pinch that. Make sure I'm getting the line exactly on the fold to the best of my abilities. This is where, so one technique of creating pleats, especially in garments, is we'll draw all of these lines on the wrong side, and then we'll do thread tracing, either by hand or by machine. I like the machine thread tracing, where we just, with a basting stitch, stitch the line all the way down. That makes it really easy to see the line as we roll it onto this fold. So if you notice, there is exactly, this one knife pleat is half of the box pleat. And these knife pleats are the same size as our last one, and together they make a pleat that is twice as wide. So our knife pleats were 1 inch wide, these box pleats are 2 inches wide. All right, so get that all together. Press it really well. There we go. I like filming the pleats on this ironing board covers because you can see the thickness through here. Whenever you're ironing on an ironing board cover that's the same color as the muslin, it's harder to see this detailing. Grab my pins. And now I'm gonna pin through here. I am also going to pin along the bottom just to keep these pleats in place better. I find that makes it a lot easier when I am picking this up and moving it from the ironing board to the sewing machine. And again, as I am pinning this, I'm being really careful to make sure that these are not shifting and I'm not creating some accidental like slight opening there, because we want this to be exactly where I pressed it. Okay, so that is one box pleat done. Let's do the other one. So this one's the opposite. We've got 2 lines and we're pushing them away from each other. Again, I'm going to do this all as one step. Make sure I've got that line as perfect on that fold as I can get it. Pull it towards the other one and then press. Being very careful to make sure I don't accidentally hit the heads of my pins because these are plastic pins. Pin it down. One thing you'll also want to do is as you're pulling your pleats over, watch your seam allowance line and make sure that that is still lining up. If you've cut all of your edges as straight as possible, this should line up really nice and clean when you are all done. It shouldn't be off center. So I'll show you that in a second. So I'm going to do it wrong on purpose here for a second. So like that. Can you guys see how much off that is? That tells me that I have folded this bottom edge over too much. And then on the reverse, it's not lining up because it's too open down here. Okay, so use your seam allowance line as also a guide for whether or not your pleat is straight. Okay, and I'm going to press this. And stick the pin in. And now once every pleat is pressed in, you've got two different types of pleats. You've got the regular pleat and the inverted box pleat. Regular box, inverted. Plus 1/2 inch on either side to give you a little bit of wiggle room there. So, okay, so all that's left is to stitch right across our seam line. Goodness. Stitch right across our seam line with a basting stitch. So I'm going to do that and then come back and we're going to take a look at how this pleat moves. So now I have this all stitched and held together. The pleats are not coming apart. If I open them up here, they're not going anywhere. So here is the regular box pleat. Now that it's all stitched together, it's kind of like opening a box, a regular box pleat. The outside is like the flaps of the box opening up. And then an inverted box pleat is like the bottom of the box. You can't open it because the flaps are all sealed shut. So box pleats, inverted, regular. From this side, this is the way that they go. So I'm going to put my hand right here. So this is the regular box pleat. When I flip it over, it becomes the inverted box pleat. And the inverted becomes the regular box pleat. So just know that box pleats are the ones that flip depending on which side of the fabric you are looking at. And that's box pleats.